interest of time, we'll just move it. A quorum being present, the Committee on Homeland Security will come to order. I would first like to welcome our newest member, Congressman Ron Estes from Kansas, to the committee. Welcome. It's good to have you. Committee's meeting today for consideration of H.R. 3359, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Act of 2017, H.R. 3328, the Cuban Airport Security Act of 2017, H.R. Resolution 447, directing the Secretary of DHS to transmit certain documents relating to DHS policies and activities relating to businesses owned and controlled by the President. H.R. 2626, the Strong Visa Integrity Secures America Act. H.R. 3202, the Cyber Vulnerability Disclosure Reporting Act. H.R. 3284, the Joint Counterterrorism Awareness Workshop Series Act of 2017. And H.R. 2805 to permanently authorize the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Business Travel Card Program. Chair announces that any requests for recorded votes may be rolled until around 1:15 p.m. and may recess the committee at any point. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. As the threats to our homeland continue to grow and our various adversaries plan their next attacks, we need to make sure we can defend our shores and keep America safe. The advancement of technology and the speed of communication have made it easier for our enemies to target our country. Some of the dangers directed towards the United States may materialize on the other side of the ocean, but are still just one plane ride away. Others may arrive silently in an email box without any notice. With national security challenges multiplying daily, our defenses must be strong, from distant airports and foreign countries to the personal computers in our living rooms. This morning's markup contains a series of important bills that will help strengthen the defense of our homeland by requiring efforts to raise international aviation security standards, providing a report to disclose cyber vulnerabilities, establishing a joint counterterrorism awareness workshop series, and authorizing a travel card program to facilitate business travel for the United States to Asia. We will also consider legislation from Congressman Hurd that improves visa security and visa applicant vetting. His bill requires CBP to use new technology to screen travelers at airports and review the social media pages of high-risk applicants for indicators of support for terrorism. Additionally, this markup includes a bill that I have introduced with the ranking member to bolster our civilian cyber defense through the authorization of a cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency at DHS. Engaging in cyber warfare is a tactic that our adversaries are becoming more and more involved with as they look to turn digital breakthroughs into digital bombs. From nation-state hacking to brand name breaches, our cyber rivals are desperately trying to break through our online protections. Similar to how the House came together last week and passed the first ever comprehensive reauthorization of DHS, we must be united in a bipartisan fashion and make sure the department has an operational component to protect our federal and civilian networks and strengthen digital America. Sadly, our partners on this committee and so many vital pieces of legislation have decided to introduce a partisan measure today. We have dispensed with a related resolution of inquiry already this year and will do so again. With that, the chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to commend you and your staff for collaborating with me and the Democratic members of this committee on the Department of Homeland Security's authorization bill. Last week's vote in the House highlights the bipartisan work of this committee and gives us all hope for the bill's prospects in the Senate. Today, we are considering 7 measures that address a wide range of Homeland Security concerns. I'm pleased we are considering a resolution of inquiry introduced by Vice Ranking Member Watson Coleman that directs the Department of Homeland Security to provide this committee with information regarding payments made to the Trump Organization or costs incurred in association with the Trump's family members' travel on Trump Organization business. We are in uncharted territory as a nation. For the first time in history, we have a president who refuses to put his investments and businesses' interests in a blind trust. Instead, the Trump Organization is in a revocable trust whose purpose is to hold assets for the exclusive benefit of Donald J. Trump. Since President Trump took the oath of office, his sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, have traveled around the world at great expense to the U.S. taxpayers to promote business for the Trump Organization. DHS has little choice but to incur whatever costs are associated with carrying out its protective mission for the President's children, but given the scarcity of departmental resources, we need to know the degree to which U.S. taxpayer dollars are expended to essentially increase the President's personal wealth. We also need to know whether the department is doing business with the Trump Organization. We on this committee have a responsibility to find out whether decision makers within DHS are favoring the President's company in procurement or hospitality decisions. This information is important to ensure that the scarce Homeland Security dollars are used appropriately and responsibly in order to carry out the department's mission. In addition to supporting Res 447, I would also urge approval of H.R. 2805, a bill introduced by CTI Ranking Member Rice to make the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Business Travel Card Program permanent. Additionally, I support H.R. 3202, the Cyber Vulnerability Disclosure Reporting Act, as introduced by Representative Jackson Lee. I'm also pleased to see legislation I co-sponsored, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency Act of 2017, on the agenda. Mr. Chairman, you and I have been trying to reorganize the Department's National Protection and Programs Directorate for quite some time. Enactment of this measure, which includes considerable input from DHS, will ensure that the Department is organized in a manner to effectively carry out both its cyber and infrastructure missions. Before I yield back, I note my grave disappointment that at this time, our last markup before the August district work period, H.R. 3328, the Cuban Airport Security Act of 2017, is on the agenda. For the life of me, I thought we have resolved all the issues dealing with Cuba, but President Trump and others continue to act in an opposite direction. So I look forward to discussion on the Cuba bill and hopefully some resolution by the end of this markup. I urge members to vote their conscience on H.R. 3328. With that, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. Let me echo your, I think it was a landmark achievement for this committee to pass by a margin of 386 votes, the first ever reauthorization of the Department of Homeland Security. It's long overdue, and it was, I want to thank staff on both sides of the aisle and the members for their hard work on that, I think, monumental achievement, and I urge the Senate to pass it as soon as possible. Other members are reminded they may have opening statements that they can submit for the record. By agreement between the chair and ranking member, the committee, by unanimous consent, shall use an amendment roster today.
Mr. Chairman.
The ranking member is recognized.
Reserving the right to object, and I will not object, would the chair please explain our agreement regarding the amendment roster? And I yield to the chair.
I thank the gentleman and all committee members for agreeing to the use of this roster. We've agreed that bills be open to amendment at any point, and that we shall take up amendments in the order listed on the roster. The chair will allow members to offer amendments listed on the roster out of order to the extent practicable, and in a manner not prohibited by House or committee rules. Amendments not listed on the roster may be considered at the conclusion of consideration of the roster. Additionally, it's my understanding there's a bipartisan agreement on a number of amendments. Members who have more than one amendment to a bill may be permitted to offer their amendments on block if they wish.
I thank the chair for this explanation and withdraw my reservations.
I thank the ranking member. I now call up H.R. 3359, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Act of 2017. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 3359.
The objection to reading is dispensed with. The bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. The chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes on the bill. This bipartisan legislation that I introduced with the ranking member and several committee members for the first time authorizes and redesignates the existing National Protection and Programs Directorate, NPPD, as a Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security. This new operational agency will be led by a director and will be comprised of 3 divisions: cybersecurity, infrastructure security, and emergency communications. The legislation ensures that the 3 divisions will collaborate on a regular basis to further operational coordination across the new agency. This realignment of NPPD's structure will allow it to become more streamlined and effective in carrying out existing authorities while achieving the department's goal of creating a standalone operational organization focusing on and elevating the vital cybersecurity and infrastructure security missions. In recent years, we've seen hackers attack private companies like Sony, Target, and Yahoo, as well as government institutions, which include our Office of Personnel Management, where 20 million security clearances were stolen, and Great Britain's National Health Service. With each passing day, nation states and cyber criminals are continuing to look to expose new vulnerabilities, and because America has become so dependent on computer networks and information technology, everyone is a potential victim. Today, the committee takes a major step forward with this legislation. We've worked closely with the Department of Homeland Security and my colleagues across the aisle to ensure our homeland remains ready to protect Americans from dangerous cyber attacks. We expect a strong bipartisan vote today, and I look forward to working with the other committees on the way to get this vital legislation, which will prioritize the cyber mission in the department. And I look forward to working to get this to the floor. I want to thank again the ranking member working with me and my staff on this endeavor, and I yield back the balance of my time. Is there any further discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Thompson is recognized.
I basically support your comments. It's something that we should actually, quite frankly, have done some time ago, but we're there. And it would move this agency forward by this reorganization effort. And it appears that all the stakeholders have lined up in agreement, and we move forward. So with that, I support the bill in its current form and yield back.
And I appreciate those comments. As the gentleman knows, we introduced a similar bill last Congress, and because of the jurisdictional challenges of this committee, unfortunately, good policy was blocked based solely on jurisdiction, something I want to continue to work with you, sir, to fix in the future. Any further discussion on the bill? There being no further discussion of the bill and no amendments listed on the roster, does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no amendments, the question now occurs on agreeing to the bill H.R. 3359. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. Question now occurs on reporting the bill H.R. 3359 to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now call up H.R. 3328, the Cuban Airport Security Act of 2017. The bill is circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 3328.
The objection reading is dispensed with. The bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Katko, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the ranking minority member's comments, but I will note that this is a very different bill than what was submitted last time, and this bill that I introduced in the committee passed similar legislation last year, but was much different in a way. At that time, I had very serious concerns about the security at Cuba's airports, and the Cuban government denied members of the committee visas to the island, which were requested so we could examine the situation for ourselves. This legislation today is not about partisan politics. It's simply about security. We're not aiming to stop flights. We simply want to make them secure. And chief among my concerns, Mr. Thompson and others, is that U.S. airlines operating in Cuba pay an agency controlled by the communist government to conduct almost all airline operations on the ground, and they do so in a relatively blind fashion. The airlines have no visibility into who these workers are, how they are vetted, and how much they are being paid. Given the seriousness of the threat that individuals with insider access to sensitive areas of the airport pose to aviation security, both here at home and abroad, which we've addressed significantly before, cannot be ignored. This legislation requires airlines to make every practical effort to directly hire their employees. However, understanding the constraints on airlines operating in this difficult environment, if they are unable to directly hire their own workers, they must at least publicly disclose the contracts with the Cuban government. This bill also addresses a larger threat to aviation security by requiring the administration to take steps to raise the minimum security standards internationally through the International Civil Aviation Organization. It also improves congressional oversight of the Federal Air Marshal Service by requiring them to disclose all agreements with foreign partners. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Chair.
Ranking member is recognized.
The comments I mentioned in my opening statement, for almost a year now, we've had flights going to Cuba. President Obama thought it was a good idea. It was recommended by the agency. We continue to somehow not address a lingering issue around Cuba. I've been there a number of times. I've not felt any way unsecure. I understand the gentleman's from New York's interest in doing this. We'll move forward on the bill, Mr. Katko. If you and your wisdom see this as the right thing to do, it does not create an undue standard on Cuba. But again, the domestic carriers who are presently flying to Cuba have vetted, from my information, a secure situation, TSA also. So we'll go with it. I just don't want us to continue to fight Cuba. Wonderful people in the area make a wonderful contribution, and I'd love for that to continue to be the way forward. So while I have some concern about your bill, I will not ask for a recorded vote on it. We'll support it. But if the gentleman will agree to work with us to make sure that this is not somehow singling the Cuban people out for a standard that we don't hold any other country to, I'll be happy to work with you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I appreciate the rank minority member's comments, and I appreciate the willingness to work with us, and I question your judgment in putting any trust in me, but we'll have to just deal with that for now. But my passion is to make sure that air travel throughout the world is safe, and we've addressed this issue where we see issues, and it's kind of a unique situation in Cuba right now. Nothing is meant to harm to travel to and from Cuba. It's just meant to make sure it's safe, and that's all. And also, there's other adjuncts in there about the Federal Air Marshal Service and raising ICAO standards internationally, which I think are vitally important. And I appreciate your support, and I appreciate your understanding, and you have my word. We'll work together in a bipartisan manner like we always do. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, briefly.
Oh, Mr. Garrett is recognized.
Thank you. I'm going to try to be as quick as I can. Sometimes in this body we talk about our friends across the aisle, and when I say that as it relates to the ranking member, I mean it. It's been my honor to get to work with and serve with the ranking member of this committee. I also know well the gentleman from New York. The day before 9/11, the probability that a commercial airliner would fly into the Twin Towers was nil. It didn't exist. And so in Cuba, you have a circumstance where there are wonderful and amazing people, and I think we've made wonderful progress towards normalizing relations, but they're so economically downtrodden that it's a system wrought with bribery. It's a system wrought with black market drivers in the economy. And all the gentleman from New York's bill does is seek to ensure that the standards for security for individuals getting on airplanes in Cuba and to Cuba is similar to that across the rest of the world. We know that there's a documented link between Hezbollah, for example, and the Cuban government. And so I genuinely respect and admire the ranking member and think it's wonderful that we're going to do this in a bipartisan manner, but I promise that if I thought there were any nefarious motives by the gentleman from New York, I wouldn't support the bill. This is needed, and it's productive legislation. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the bill? Ranking members recognized.
Well, I take the gentleman from New York at his word. I trust his judgment. He said somehow he didn't want to put me in a tough spot, but I trust you, and I look forward to working with you.
Gentleman yields. Any further discussion on the bill? Mr. Katko.
Thank you, sir. That's it.
Any further discussion? There being no further discussion of the bill, no amendments listed on the roster. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no amendments, the question now occurs in agreeing to the bill. H.R. 3328. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. Question now occurs on reporting the bill H.R. 3328 to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now call up House Resolution 447, directing the Secretary of Homeland Security to transmit certain documents to the House of Representatives relating to Department of Homeland Security policies and activities related to the businesses owned or controlled by President Donald J. Trump. The resolution was circulated in advance, and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the resolution.
H.Res. 447.
Without objection, reading is dispensed with. The resolution is considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Watson-Coleman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, each day American taxpayers are asked this administration for a balanced budget, good-paying jobs, living wages, and affordable health care, and instead are paid in lip service as the president and his adult children enrich themselves at America's expense. The tax dollars Americans want to see rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, investing in the education of our children, and ensuring senior citizens receive adequate return on their investment in our workforce is instead being wasted furthering the business interests of the Trump organization. With this resolution, I'm asking that DHS provide this committee with all documentation of payments, expenditures, costs to or by the department or associated with protection that has not been documented by the Secretary as in furtherance of the United States government. Once obtained, this committee can begin to properly investigate this matter. This body has a constitutional obligation to investigate and to ensure that the Department of Homeland Security resources are solely used to ensure the protection of those seeking to prioritize and to advocate for the interests of the United States of America. The Committee on Homeland Security has a duty to shield the homeland and protect Americans, which is why I urge my colleagues to investigate these expenses to ensure that our limited federal resources are targeted toward true security needs and not lining the pockets of this president. As an example, since President Trump's inauguration, the Trump children have visited Uruguay, the Dominican Republic, Ireland, the United Kingdom, Aspen, Colorado, Vancouver, and Dubai in furtherance of the president's business interests. This puts a tremendous burden on the Secret Service. As a committee with oversight over the agency, it is critical to understand how much of a burden this travel is creating. It is unprecedented and unethical for the President of the United States and his family to advance personal agendas and businesses on the federal government's and ultimately the taxpayers' dime. Approving this resolution would be the first step we can take towards providing answers to the American people and preventing further misuse of taxpayer dollars to line the pocket of a president who has made clear that the nation's best interest is not his first priority. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I yield back.
I think first, this resolution of inquiry is not really reflective of the important bipartisan, turn my mic on, bipartisan work of this committee that we typically take. Beyond that, I have numerous concerns. This resolution is a duplicative document production, or seeks a duplicative document production from DHS already requested by the minority. The committee has already debated a large part of this amendment at the markup last month. No new information has come to light since that markup to justify using this ROI. Furthermore, Secretary Kelly had testified before our committee in June that he would respond to information requests from members of Congress, regardless of party. It's our understanding that the minority has made a very similar request for cost information to the Secret Service. The service is working on this request, and there's no indication that it's being ignored. Additionally, the minority had the opportunity to question the Secret Service Director in June at a hearing on these issues. The committee had a historic bipartisan accomplishment last week with the passage of the first ever DHS authorization by the House. In my judgment, we need to build on these bipartisan achievements and focus on the priorities critical to our homeland security, some of which we are addressing in this markup. Approval of this resolution would damage the committee's relationship with DHS, which is already working to provide information on the minority's concerns, and it would further distract from legislative priorities essential to supporting the department's vital mission of protecting the homeland. So for these reasons, I oppose HRES 447. Any further discussion?
Chairman, if I might.
Ms. Watson-Coleman's
Thank you,
recognized.
Mr. Chairman. First of all, I have tremendous respect for this committee, and as long as I've been here, we've tried to work in a bipartisan manner to address the issues of safety and security to the homeland. So I don't want this to be interpreted in any way as to be demeaning or diminishing the respect that I have for the work that we've done. However, I do believe that we as a committee and we as a Congress have not been fulfilling our obligation to be as rigorous and accountable as we should be in an era in which we've got more questions than we have answers and more irregularities than we have regular order as it relates to this particular president, his business enrichment, the fact that he hasn't divested himself from these issues, and the fact that his children are traipsing around the world in furtherances of those businesses that specifically enrich him. And so I do believe that we should be working on this matter and all matters of this ilk and any other in a bipartisan way. And so I invite my colleagues here to stand up on behalf of the independent, co-equal branch of government that we are, the one that puts a pin in it and holds the accountability of the executive branch and anywhere else that we need to be holding accountability, and to join me in supporting this resolution. And I thank you for the opportunity to respond.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, briefly.
Mr. Garrett's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the spirit of bipartisanship, I wonder if the gentlelady would also include an inquiry as to how it is that the previous administration and the President increased his net worth fourfold while in the White House, and also whether or not the gentlelady would include an amendment that might search to see the cost of the security details provided for the previous president when he rode on the yacht with Tom Hanks, when he visited Tuscany, when he went kite surfing with David Branson, when he visited Berlin, Hawaii, when he visited England with Prince Henry, when he went to Indonesia's Ayung River, when he spent time in Rancho Mirage, California, or the British Virgin Islands, or when he golfed at the Mid-Pacific Country Club, when he went on a yacht with Richard Geffen, or when he spent time in French Polynesia, all just within the last all just in 5 months. if we're going to do this in a bipartisan manner and we want to look out for tax dollars, should we maybe not also look into how much it costs to look out for the security of the previous president and the first family? Because when George Bush left office, he went to Texas. When Bill Clinton left office, he went to New York. But if we really want to be hawkish on tax dollars, would she entertain an amendment that would look into that? Also, I would submit that given the fact that the Trump family has a business endeavor that has goods and services in the stream of commerce, it's gotten to the point where I wonder, had that man invented bar soap, if there would be people on this committee suggesting that we shouldn't wash. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Watson.
I suspect I should be responding because it was directed at me, even though I think this is a discussion of apples and oranges. But I would entertain a reasonable and rational amendment to this if I could guarantee that the members of this committee right here would support this resolution. Because at the end of the day, it is this resolution that is before us, and it is these actions that are questionable that lead to not whether or not a president is sitting on a yacht, but whether or not a president and his family are reaching their pockets at the expense of being the president of the United States of America. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the resolution? Mr. Thompson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think for the record, my letter asking for the information you referenced in your statement, we sent that letter in May, asking for a response sometime in June. We've not gotten a response asking for the information. One of the responsibilities we have as a committee is oversight and asking for information. We've not even heard back from the department from our letter. So basically, this resolution of inquiry is absolutely in order, because in order for us to do our work, we have to have information. So we've made the request. We've not heard from the department, and the gentle lady from New Jersey is quite right. In order for us to figure out whether some of these trips have been personally motivated for profit, we need to have access to the information. We need to know what it's costing us. As important, ethics matter. And we now have someone in the White House who basically entertains at his own private property that taxpayers are having to pay expenses for. There are a lot of places you could go in this country other than properties you own. But we need to see for ourselves as a committee exactly what's happening and what it's costing. So the gentle ladies from New Jersey's resolution of inquiry is in order from our perspective. We look forward to it. If you'd like to amend the resolution of inquiry to include President Obama, President Clinton, or whomever, and you want to support it, that's fine. None of us have any problems with access to information. And that's what we're simply trying to get to at this point. But as important, I don't see anyone in government conducting business for personal profit at the expense of the taxpayers. And I think part of what we can do is look at the documentation and see where it leads us. And I think this committee should follow the facts if we are provided with the facts. And this resolution is an effort to get the facts, or at least the information, before the committee to do that. So I yield back in support of the gentle lady's resolution.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields, and
Mr. Chairman.
the letter request has been made, and I will work with the ranking member to ensure the production of documents from the department in response to your letter request. The gentle lady from Texas is recognized.
I rise in support of the gentlelady's resolution, and as well refer to the gentleman who was making remarks as I came in, I assume about the previous administration. I'm not sure whether he was also including President George W. Bush, President, it went out. President H.W. Bush. I'm not sure whether he was including them as well. But what I would say is in the court of law, sometimes we make the point of the timeliness of the counsel's argument or the statute of limitations. I would not suggest that his inquiry and interest of the previous administration could not be reflected in any resolution that he would so choose to write. I think the gentlelady's resolution stands on its own 2 feet. And not only does it have a security element to it, but it has a constitutional element to it in terms of the violation of the Emoluments Clause. And as the ranking member has indicated, this information has been requested over and over again by a number of committees in different aspects. It is clear that the security of the administration present was excessive. It is also clear that the previous administration did not have a New Jersey home or a Florida home that the previous administration decided to basically make their home during the first couple of months of the tenure as President of the United States. And so we do know that the security was extremely excessive. We know that there is a potential that Secret Service had to pay the hotel accommodations through tax dollars for being at a resort that I assume the President would argue was 5-star and beyond. And it is no doubt that there are elements of the President's business and his children's business that are directly related to his income. For example, the Trump Hotel, visit with any surrounding hotel, including the Willard, was indicated that their business has drastically gone down since they were a welcome location for a lot of international diplomats, and I assume diplomacy occurred there in meetings as people stumble over themselves to book the Trump Hotel. So I don't think, and whatever is attributed to the security questions, which is really our jurisdiction and purview, we are presently doing such a resolution in judiciary as well. But we also have, as documentation here, a trip to the Uruguayan Riviera. Uruguay is South America's forgotten corner, and I understand the family went there or had some meeting there that drew the family there. I'm particularly struck by the Aspen visit of the children, where I understand that the Secret Service had to purchase the ski equipment or the ski scooters, I don't have the right terminology, to be on the slopes to be there where the family was. So this is not, we have jurisdiction over Secret Service and a number of other elements dealing with the security of the Trump family. I don't think this resolution steps away from that responsibility, but it asks for documents of the payments and documents as to whether or not Homeland Security resources are being used to the benefit and the financial benefit of the Trump family and Trump organization. Just asking for information, which is the oversight responsibilities that we have. I'm stunned by the gentleman's recounting of temporary visits and interaction on the President's vacation time that were not to his business benefit, but were allowed in the normal course of being President and having the opportunity to vacation or step away for a moment. That is different from it going to the person's own pocketbook, is what part of the questioning of this resolution. So I will conclude by simply saying, as I heard the chairman say, maybe he's going to assist with the answers coming by way of formal responses to Mr. Thompson's letter. But in the meantime, the gentlelady's resolution stands on its own 2 feet. It is legitimate, and it is worthy, and any other resolution regarding past presidents which have nothing to do with this resolution and are completely apples and oranges, I'm sure that my friends on the other side of the aisle will have every opportunity to introduce such a resolution at the appropriate time. With that, I will yield back with a strong support for H-Res 447.
Any further discussion on the resolution? Mr. Payne's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of H.R. Res. 447, and to to my friend on the other side of the aisle that made reference to travel that the previous president has made since leaving office, not during his time as president, I think is where we come up with apples and oranges. Also being able to enrich yourself while you are in that office by traveling to properties that you own and having the government pay you to protect yourself while you're at those properties. And in terms of if he made soap, well, it probably wouldn't be made in the United States. We know that for sure. I think that, you know, there, for instance, you know, it's a standard practice for the U.S. Secret Service to reimburse presidential campaigns for the costs of traveling with them. However, one of President Trump's companies, Tag Air, owned an airplane in which his campaign and the Secret Service detail traveled, meaning that the Secret Service reimbursed President Trump directly for flights. That is the issue. And we can have this resolution taken any president. We're not talking about excluding anyone. If there's circumstances with past presidents that we find in the same circumstance, then it needs to be noted. But it is our duty and our obligation as a body. The forefathers made us the check and balance of the executive branch. And that's what we're doing here. So I am in full support of this resolution, and I yield back.
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yield. Would you gentlemen yield to me?
He did. Gentleman yields to the gentleman from Texas.
Okay, I didn't hear him. I just want to put into the record that from the Washington Post article, Eric Trump's business trip to Uruguay cost taxpayers $97,830 in hotel bills. I also want to reflect that my recollection has it noted that the Trump security costs in the first 6 months, it might have been even shorter, more money than the President Obama in the 8 years that he was in office. I recall that fact. I'm going to say I recall it. We're checking it now, but I recall that particular fact. So obviously this was a business trip that was had, and we paid almost $100,000 on security. With that, I yield back. Thank the gentleman for yielding.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the resolution? Mr. Lungman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo the comments of several of my colleagues. This is about seeking access to information. We have an unprecedented situation where a president owns still multiple businesses and is receiving profits from those businesses. And I think the American people have a right to know. And I would not object. Some of my other colleagues have talked about perhaps a resolution seeking information about the travel of past presidents, and certainly we should, if there's sufficient support among the committee to look at those things, we certainly should. But this is about a resolution that looks at the policies and activities relating to the businesses owned and controlled by President Trump. Also, the travel of his children in support of those businesses. So, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, President Trump's refusal to be completely transparent and accountable to the American people really does leave many questions unanswered. Despite making a big show about separating himself from his company, President Trump, as we know, has refused to form a blind trust, and instead has placed the Trump organizations in a revocable trust for the exclusive benefit of Donald J. Trump. Under this arrangement, the President maintains the right to continue to receive reports on his company's profits and losses, and to fire either of his sons at any point. The prospect that the Trump organization, with an estimated 500 subsidiaries, would be participating in the federal acquisition marketplace or competing for the federal hospitality dollars, quite frankly, is troubling. This year, over $400 billion in government contracts are set to expire across the 19 largest federal agencies, including at the Department of Homeland Security. So how can we be assured that when agency decision makers look at bidders, there is not a preference for Trump Organization companies? I think this is a legitimate question. So the responsibility lies with this committee to conduct oversight on any potential conflicts, particularly as they enter into the realm of Homeland Security. For instance, there are the upcoming acquisitions for President Trump's border wall. The President has repeatedly emphasized that he's a builder. How can we be assured that there will be fair and open competition if, in fact, that wall is built and that the Trump Organization subsidiary does not get a leg up over other U.S. businesses? So, Mr. Chairman, I would say that we need to see what acquisition guidance, if any, exists within DHS to prevent DHS acquisition decision executive from making decisions to financially benefit the President. The presidency is not a mechanism to build personal wealth. That is something that was written into certainly the Emoluments Clause as well. Americans deserve to know that their taxpayer dollars are being utilized responsibly in furtherance of the Department's mission to safeguard the American people, our homeland, and our values, and not being manipulated to the benefit of President Trump and his family business holdings. And I will say, once again, there's significant expense with the travel of the President's children, particularly those that are put in charge of his businesses as they go around the world in furtherance of running those companies, and again, which would ultimately wind up enriching the President as those companies make profits. And this is about transparency. I think the American people have a right to know what those expenses are and how the dollars are being spent. So I support the gentlelady's resolution, and I hope that this committee would do the same. And again, if there are other members who want to submit resolutions about looking at other presidential travel, particularly if there's a concern or an accusation that somehow such travel enriched a former president, then let's have at it. But I've heard no such accusations or evidence to suggest that would be the case for past presidents. But certainly if there's a case to be made, we should look at that as well. But this is about the here and now and looking at this president's finances and travel. And I think the American people have a right to know. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the resolution? Ms. Berrigan is recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to rise in support of this. I think that, it's unfortunate that we got into this whole bipartisan, this partisan bickering on this, because I think regardless of who the president is, regardless of who is in the White House, the American people have a right to know how their dollars are being spent. Regardless of who the president is, if there's any potential of conflict of interest, we should be asking these questions. Regardless of who the president is, when the Secret Service comes to this committee and says that they're being spread thin and concerned about time in having to protect somebody in different parts of the country and what that does, when we have the duty to oversee that department, regardless of who the president is, we should be investigating and checking. Regardless of who the president is, if there's potential of taxpayer dollars being spent for financial gain, it should be investigated. And I think that is where the message is lost today. It's not about, oh, Donald Trump, oh, Obama, oh, Bill Clinton. It should be about our duty. And our duty is to be able to provide transparency to the American people. And when all these red flags come up, and I call them red flags because we've heard from, in this committee, we have heard about the Secret Service being spread very thin, having to protect somebody in different parts of the country, then we have a duty to continue to look into that. And so it's really unfortunate. It's unfortunate just to kind of hear the whole discussion and how it's turned, because one of the things I like about this committee is we do try to work in a bipartisan manner. We do look after the homeland. And so when we come and we talk about the wall and we talk about this, it becomes this divisiveness, and I wish we would kind of stick to the bottom line and forget for a second about who's there and just say, would you do this if? And the answer to that for me is yes. Regardless of who the president is, when I see these factors, the Secret Service being cut very thin, a possible conflict of interest, we don't know what the businesses are, what does that do for our decision making? Then I'm going to support it. And that's why I support this. I yield back.
Would the gentlelady yield?
A request was made to yield. Will the gentlelady yield to the gentleman from Virginia?
I'll yield.
Okay, and so I want to be clear. If there were a Forbes article that said how the ex-president made $20 million since arriving in Washington, would you support an investigation into how the ex-president made $20 million since arriving in Washington? And I'll ask that and move forward for a moment, because there is a Forbes article dated January 20th, 2017, which ironically is the day that President Obama left office.
I'm going to
entitled
reclaim my time.
And
I'm
how
gonna reclaim my
Barack
time
Obama
to
has
make
made
sure I
$20 million
respond to that.
since arriving in Washington.
Reclaims.
I also think that the
I'm-
same Secret Service that
Chair,
protects the Trump
I'm
family
reclaiming my
protects the Obama
time, and
family.
he should stop
Gentlelady
speaking.
reclaims her time.
As I said before, sitting here today, my duty is to the American people have transparency. So whoever's in the White House, if there is spending going on, I will be supporting to making sure that we're transparent in knowing where that money is going. Now, I'm a freshman. I just got here in January of this year. Regardless of who is in the White House, if these factors are present, I'm going to be supporting it. I hope that answers the question. And with that, I yield back. The
Gentlelady yields back. Any further discussion on the resolution? There being no further discussion on the resolution, no amendments on the roster, does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no amendments, the question now occurs on reporting House Resolution 447 to the House with an unfavorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. No. It's a very loud no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion
Mr. Chairman.
is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Watson-Coleman is
Thank you,
recognized.
Mr. Chairman. I seek a recorded vote on it.
I thought that was coming. A recorded vote has been requested. Pursuant to the chair's previous announcement, this vote will be postponed. I now call up H.R. 2626, the Strong Visa Integrity Secures America Act, and discharge the Subcommittee on Border and Maritime Security from further discussion. The bill was circulated in advance. Printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 2626.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with. Bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. An amendment in the nature of a substitute has been offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hurd. Does the gentleman wish to offer his amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute listed on the roster, and I ask for its consideration at this time.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2626, offered by Mr. Hurd.
The objection reads dispensed with, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered base text for purposes of amendment. The amendment in the nature of a substitute was noticed in compliance with committee rules. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment in the nature of a substitute I'm offering today would require DHS to assign ICE visa security units to not fewer than 50 high-risk diplomatic and consular posts at which visas are authored. In addition, the amendment in the nature of the substitute authorizes the Secretary to assign employees to conduct remote visa security vetting to support an additional 50 posts that do not have visa security units in country. This allows for increased vetting prior to the applicant's consular interview. Early vetting gives ICE agents critical lead time to resolve derogatory information and coordinate with consular officers to fill any information gaps through interviews of the applicants. The bill includes several other enhancements to the travel screening process, including providing DHS with a more unified role in granting security, advisory opinions requested by the Department of State, and requiring the screening of electronic passports. It also encourages the use of facial recognition or other biometric technology at domestic airports of entry. I encourage everyone for a yes vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the amendment and the nature of a substitute? There being no further discussion, the committee will move to consideration the amendments on the roster. Per the roster agreement listed first is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Mr. Vella, would the gentleman like to offer his amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 amendments at the desk, and I request that they may be considered en bloc at this time.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk shall report the en bloc amendment.
En bloc amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 2626. Offer, Mr. Vaylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first amendment seeks to enhance oversight on how U.S. Customs and Border Protection utilizes facial recognition technology at airports. This technology has great potential to deliver the biometric exit capability that Congress has long sought to ensure that international visitors do not overstay. As such, I am happy that CBP is testing its use in the field. My amendment would require CBP to report annually to Congress on its utilization of facial recognition technology. The report must also include not only information on the technology used, but also how much U.S. citizen biometric data is collected at each airport and what CBP does with this sensitive data. Importantly, the report must include specific information on CBP's adherence to protocols for storing, erasing, and destroying such information. This report is important to ensure that privacy protections remain at the forefront as CBP deploys this technology. My second amendment is technical in nature and would provide more specific direction to CBP on how to implement the continuous screening of visitors who travel to the U.S. from a visa waiver program country. My amendment clarifies that CBP should continuously vet visa waiver program visitors who are present in the United States and who are expected to arrive within 30 days against appropriate criminal, national security, and terrorism databases. My last amendment expands requirements in DHS's annual visa overstay report to include information on the methodology utilized to develop its numerical estimates. The annual visa overstay report provides important projections of not only the number of overstays, but also on how DHS tracks progress at reducing overstays. Given that policymakers rely on this report to inform programs and laws, it is important that we understand how DHS arrived at the projections it shares. I urge my colleagues to support my en bloc amendment, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? There being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the en bloc amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute offered by the gentleman from Texas. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Listed next is an amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa. Would the gentleman like to offer his amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 amendments at the desk, and I ask that they be considered in block at this time.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk shall report the en bloc amendment.
En bloc amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 2626. Offer, Mr. Correa.
Without objection, reading is dispensed with. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, my first amendment seeks to clarify Section 5 of the bill to ensure that CBP only accesses the DHS database of international students enrolled in U.S. academic institutions for the purpose of inspecting such persons at ports of entry. My second amendment seeks to improve Section 6, which requires DHS to carry out social media screenings of certain visa applicants. As I understand, research is underway across the federal government to build social media research tools to identify this risk. Given DHS's shrinking R&D budget, it only makes sense to leverage the federal taxpayer dollars already expended elsewhere in the government to address Homeland Security capability gaps. I urge adoption of in block of these amendments and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the amendment? I think that it's a good amendment, and I think the social media aspect is long overdue. I know the San Bernardino case had issues related to it, related to the lack of looking at and screening social media. So I support the amendment. Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the en bloc amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute offered by the gentleman from California. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Listed next is an amendment offered by the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Berrigan. Would the gentlewoman like to offer her amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment and wish to have it considered at this time.
And the clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 2626. Offer Ms. Barragan.
Without objection, reading is dispensed with. The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment is simple. It adds clarifying language to ensure that when it comes to social media screening, DHS targets its limited resources on those visa applicants who, aside and apart from coming from a high-risk country, are viewed as a risk. Section 6 of the underlying provision directs DHS to carry out social media reviews in a, quote, a risk-based manner. My amendment seeks to further clarify that social media reviews should only be undertaken for those individuals that DHS determines in the course of carrying out its visa vetting activities warrant additional scrutiny. This language will ensure that residency or citizenship alone do not trigger such reviews. I appreciate the majority working with me on this amendment and urge passage and yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. Any further discussion on the amendment? There being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute offered by the gentlewoman from California. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. There are no other amendments listed on the roster. Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute?
Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Ms. Jackson-Lee is recognized. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2626. Offered by Ms. Jackson-Lee.
Without objection, reading is dispensed with. The gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman and the ranking member. I'm going to read specifically my language of my amendment, Section 7, Special Rule. In the case of an alien who is granted a provisional stay of deportation or removal, is the subject of a pending proceeding challenging the removal order or otherwise is seeking to establish grounds for remaining in the United States, the removal period should not begin until 72 hours after the time when it otherwise would begin under Section 241A1 of the Immigration Nationality Act. Colleagues, I offer this amendment with reserving the right to withdraw. My amendment would direct that Immigration and Customs Enforcement would ensure in a case of an alien who is granted a provisional stay of deportation or removal, is the subject of a pending proceeding challenging the removal or otherwise is seeking to establish grounds remaining in the United States, that the removal period shall not begin until 72 hours after the time when it otherwise would begin under current statute. Let me first of all say that the role of the Homeland Security Department of Homeland Security, is to secure the homeland. And our committee is, in fact, the committee of oversight to ensure that that security proceeds. This amendment does not prohibit deportation, but it does allow reasonable time for an appeal from the person who is the subject of a removal order prior to removal. This amendment is in response to a situation that has arose with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Jose Ernesto Escobar, who lives in the Houston area with no criminal record, no danger to the public or national security, who was literally snatched away from his family. In the last couple of months, we've seen those actions, and I think even committee members who happen to be of a different party on this committee would find inhumane and certainly incomprehensible. People taking out of churches and other places, still seeking a legal way to access status in this country. Most of these people are above ground, not below ground. They're not terrorists, they're family members, and sometimes civic leaders. One in particular in our community was a religious leader who his lawyers were trying to explain his situation as a unique religious belief that if he was returned to his country, he would be subject to persecution. Mr. Escobar, in this instance, was placed under a deportation order, and appeal of that decision was underway when he was removed from the United States with no notice to his counsel and none to his family. Mr. Escobar is a pillar of the Houston community, married to a United States citizen with 2 citizen children, had been in the United States for an enormous period of time, having come in from El Salvador under the TPS status. But he was also eligible at this point in time for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals DACA policy, which his lawyers were proceeding to move on. He was eligible because he was going to be or was in school. Unfortunately, he was as well the primary provider for his family. Accolades came in from all of the community members. He was a manager of a paint store, and he had paid bills, was about to purchase a second home, and so he was a contributing member of the society. Many Houstonians wrote letters, his wife's co-workers at the Texas Children's Hospital, to junior high school friends that attest to Mr. Escobar's good moral character as a husband and father. Presently, we're seeking the same humanitarian requests to the administration as they were able to give temporarily to the Afghan young ladies who came here for robotics who were initially denied. We have to find within ourselves a belief in the humanitarian role as well as a security role that DHS plays, the State Department plays in this committee. Mr. Escobar's native country of El Salvador has been labeled as one of the, has had enormous violence since he left. He came in through the TPS, as I mentioned, and therefore the sad circumstances is that Mr. Escobar was in voluntary custody of ICE. He had come in at that time. He had been reporting regularly, and of course, he was snatched in handcuffs in front of his children and his wife. They didn't know what was proceeding. Immediately, they were appealing, and within 48 hours, with no notice, as I indicated, after having been told that his deportation would be delayed by a staff member in a local office, he was immediately deported. So I would ask my colleagues to consider this amendment.
Has raised an important issue. However, this amendment is not germane to the underlying text of the bill. Does the gentlelady wish to withdraw her amendment?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking forward to members of this committee working with me on this important issue. I don't think this does any damage to the underlying laws dealing with deportation, and I think it is a worthy component, particularly the individual is in custody and not a danger to the community. So at this time, I will seek to withdraw this particular amendment. I wanted to place Mr. Escobar's very tragic case on the record of this committee and seek to collaborate with my colleagues for an important constructive way to address this question as we proceed with the importance of securing the homeland. With that, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw the Jackson-Lee amendment at this time.
Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. Are there any further amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2626 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Question now occurs on reporting the bill H.R. 2626 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion reconsiders laid on the table. Staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes. I now call up H.R. 3202, the Cyber Vulnerability Disclosure Reporting Act. The bill is circulated in advance, and printed copies are available. Clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 3202.
Without objection, reading is dispensed with. The bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson-Lee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to Ranking Member Thompson. Thank you for including the Cyber Vulnerabilities Disclosure Reporting Act in today's markup. As a member of the Cybersecurity Committee and one who served as chair of the Transportation Security Infrastructure Committee some sessions back when the cybersecurity issue was under the Transportation Security Committee, we recognized for a period of time the cruciality, if you will, of the cyber element of security. We have seen that now in its most glaring form. We are particularly seeing it as it has impacted the number of elements of this country. We have met with through members of the subcommittee, chairman and ranking member, with the private sector community, with representatives from government to talk about cyber vulnerabilities and the crucialness of it. And as well, we have seen the impact of cyber vulnerabilities through the 2016 election. We know that it will be a major target for any terrorists and others who desire to undermine the very democratic infrastructure of this country. So I thank the Majority and Minority Committee staff for working with me and my staff preparing this bill. The Cyber Vulnerability Disclosure Reporting Act requires the Secretary of Homeland Security to submit a report on policies and procedures developed for coordinating cyber vulnerability disclosures. The report will include an annex with information on instances in which cybersecurity vulnerability disclosure policies and procedures are used to disclose details on identified weaknesses in computing systems that put digital devices at risk. The report will provide information on the degree to which the information provided by DHS was used by industry and other stakeholders. The report may also contain a description of how the Secretary of Homeland Security is working with other federal entities, critical infrastructure owners, and operators to prevent, detect, and mitigate cyber vulnerabilities, which is about 85% of the cyber assets are in the private sector. The bill addressed the problem often referred to as a zero-day event. The term zero-day event describes a situation that a network security professional or software engineer must face when they have zero time to prepare a defense against a cyber attack. Cyber attacks that target computer networks or computing devices primarily focus on a discovered or known error in the computing code. If the defect in software is discovered by network engineers and software development companies, these professionals can work to develop a patch fix for the problem before it can be exploited by those who may seek to do harm. My bill seeks a report on DHS policies and procedures for coordinating cyber vulnerability disclosures, such as zero-day events with private sector partners. This is a firewall for protecting the homeland, and particularly with the most serious, or one of the most serious aspects of interference in our security, and that is the cyber attack. Because vulnerabilities can be used by adversaries, it is important that this sensitive information is managed securely and the details are guarded against premature disclosure. There is no security in keeping zero-day events secure and not working on solutions. The protection is in finding the zero-day events, creating solutions, sharing the solution broadly, then disclosing the vulnerability to the public for the broadest dissemination of the fix for the coding error. This bill provides the committee with the opportunity to understand the process and procedures used by DHS, as well as the benefit of these disclosures may have to the private sector. There is an element in the bill that makes sure that if some matters are classified, it can be provided in a classified manner, and in order to protect those aspects. I ask my colleagues to support the Jackson Lee Amendment, and I'd like to submit into the record an article, Security News This Week, a one-stop guide to zero-day exploits, and it provides a series of incidences regarding those, such as on Tuesday, WikiLeaks dumped a trove of 8,761 purported leaked CIA documents as part of a collection called Vault 7. That's just one aspect of what can happen.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Again, I ask my colleagues to support the Jackson Lee, bill, H.R. 3202. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Any further discussion on the bill? There being no further discussion on the bill, no amendments listed on the roster, does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no amendments, the question now occurs in agreeing to the bill, H.R. 3202. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. Question now occurs in reporting the bill, H.R. 3202, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion reconsidered is laid on the table. I now call up H.R. 3284, the Joint Counterterrorism Awareness Workshop Series Act of 2017. Bill was circulated in advance. Printed copies are available. Clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 3284.
Without objection, reading is dispensed with. The bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman McCall. Ranking Member Thompson. I introduced this bill, H.R. 3284, the Joint Counterterrorism Awareness Workshop Series Act of 2017, to authorize this vital workshop series, allowing both state and local jurisdictions to prepare for coordinated terror attacks. And as a first responder myself, I want to commend the work of the Emergency Preparedness Response and Communications Subcommittee for assisting with this legislation. In 2008, we witnessed members of a terrorist organization conduct a coordinated terror attack on multiple locations in Mumbai, India. As the nation watched these terrorists create mayhem across Mumbai, it left our federal government wondering how to best assist our first responders in preparing for events like this on our own soil. the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the National Counterterrorism Center, and my colleagues in the FBI responded to this incident by creating the Joint Counterterrorism Awareness Workshop Series. This is a modest program, but it has had a significant impact. Since 2011, over 30 cities have hosted one of these workshops as a way to test their current plans, their current policies and procedures, and identify any gaps in these capabilities. Unfortunately, the threat of a coordinated terror attack is still very much present. The attacks in Paris and Brussels are a stark reminder that it is essential that our first responders have the resources and the tools needed to protect our communities. The Joint Counterterrorism Awareness Workshop Series is one of these vital tools. Mr. Chairman, H.R. 3284 authorizes the Joint Counterterrorism Awareness Workshop Series, and it delineates the activities that are required to be part of each workshop, including review of current plans, policies and procedures, and an examination of the roles and responsibilities of each participating agency. Moreover, this bill will ensure that the whole community, from government officials, law enforcement, fire, EMS, public health officials, and also the private sector, participate in these series. Additionally, this bill allows the FEMA administrator to select jurisdictions to participate in such workshops from jurisdictions that currently receive or previously received Urban Area Security Initiative funding and have requested to host a workshop. Finally, Mr. Chairman, H.R. 3284 requires participants to develop a summary report after each workshop that includes key findings and strategies to mitigate the identified gaps. I introduced this bill with bipartisan support, and Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to enter into the record a letter of support from the International Association of Fire Chiefs Chairman, and I urge all my members to be supporting this legislation in order to support our first responders.
And that letter will be submitted without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
And the gentleman yields back. Is there any further discussion on the bill? There being no further discussion, the committee will move to consideration of the amendments on the roster. Per the roster agreement listed first is an amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas. Ms. Jackson Lee, would the gentlelady like to offer her amendment?
I certainly would, Mr. Chairman, with the reservation of withdrawing the amendment. I thank the gentleman for his underlying legislation, and I wanted to bring to the attention.
Before we get to that point, the clerk shall report the amendment.
Report the amendment. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine.
Moving forward.
Amendment to H.R. 3284, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee.
Okay, without objection, reading is dispensed with. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. This amendment is dealing with the vulnerability of the JTTF and to have that the administrator of FEMA in consultation with the director of the National Counterterrorism Center and the director of the FBI to include in the report established by H.R. 3284 a security assessment that considers the security costs and benefits of images of the physical buildings and surrounding roads leading to the Joint Terrorism Force office locations being made available online in map applications. So I serve as the ranking member on the Criminal Justice, Crime, Terrorism, Homeland Security, and Investigations Committee. And I understand the concern that may be thought of by this committee in terms of dual jurisdiction. But what I do want to bring to the attention of my colleagues is the vulnerability of these offices, the exposure of these offices, and I do think it's important that we work collaboratively together to provide the instruction to DHS and the other relevant agencies to ensure that these officers, where important decisions are made, where important individuals are gathering, that these offices are particularly with enhanced security and that they are sufficiently protected. As you know, the JTTF is a partnership between various local, state, and federal agencies and private organizations that are charged with taking action against terrorism, which include the investigation of crimes such as wire fraud and identity theft. And the work of these organizations, or the JTTFs, across the nation is central to Homeland Security and the security of those offices which will be considered in the scope of the work of Homeland Security. And so I believe this is an important matter. I'd like my colleagues to assess that, and I offer the Jackson Lee amendment. With that, I yield back.
Okay, the gentlelady withdraws her amendment. Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn.
Well, I did not at this point.
I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Hoping a comment of the interest of this issue of securing the sites where these offices are.
The gentlelady's raised an important issue, and I, having been a federal prosecutor working with the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, I tend to agree. However, this amendment is not germane to the underlying text of the bill. Does the gentlelady wish to withdraw her amendment?
Well, I will hope to introduce this as a bill and seek the cooperation and collaboration of Homeland Security Committee as we move it to the respective committee, and at this point in time, I will seek to withdraw the amendment. I would make a argument that the germaneness could be waived, but at this time, I will seek to withdraw the amendment. That's unanimous consent.
Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. There are no other amendments listed on the roster. Are there any other amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the bill H.R. 3284. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. Question now occurs on reporting the bill H.R. 3284 to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now call up H.R. 2805 to permanently authorize the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Business Travel Card Program and discharge the Subcommittee on Border and Maritime Security from further consideration. Bill was circulated in advance. Printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 2805.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with. Bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. An amendment in the nature of a substitute has been offered by the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Rice. Does the gentlelady wish to offer her amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk and wish to have it considered at this time.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 2805, offered by Ms. Rice.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with. The amendment in nature of a substitute shall be considered base text. For purposes of amendment, the amendment in nature of a substitute was noticed to committee members in compliance with the rules. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my amendment in the nature of a substitute would permanently authorize the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Business Travel Card Program. Under this program, nearly 30,000 American business and government cardholders, including more than 2,000 New Yorkers, can access fast-track lanes at airports in the 21 APEC countries, which saves an average of 43 minutes per trip. This is a successful program that operates at no cost to taxpayers. Applicants must be U.S. citizens and verified business or government travelers. They must pay a $70 fee, and they must pre-enroll in a U.S. Trusted Traveler program like Global Entry. Right now, the program is set to expire on September 30th, 2018, meaning that no new cards can be issued after that date, and all cards will expire by 2021, after which Americans will no longer be able to travel throughout the region as efficiently as business travelers from other APEC countries. My amendment would permanently reauthorize the authority to issue APEC business travel cards to American citizens while maintaining DHS's authority to revoke or suspend the cards. The bill has been endorsed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Travel Association, American Hotel and Lodging Association, and the National Center for APEC. I want to thank Congressman Dan Donovan for co-sponsoring this amendment in the nature of a substitute, and Congressmen Rick Larson and Dave Reichert for being original co-sponsors of the bill. This is a common-sense bipartisan priority, and I urge all of my colleagues to give it their support. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Any further discussion on the amendment in the nature of a substitute? There being no further discussion of the amendment in the nature of a substitute, the committee now moves to consideration of the amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. There are no amendments listed on the roster. Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? There being no amendments, the question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2805. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Question now occurs on reporting H.R. 2805 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion reconsiders laid on the table. Staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes. This committee will stand in recess until 1:15 p.m. for votes. Committee will come to order. The committee postponed further proceedings on the recorded vote to report House Resolution 447 to the House with an unfavorable recommendation on which the ayes have prevailed by voice vote. Question now occurs on reporting House Resolution 447 to the House with an unfavorable recommendation. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Smith.
Aye, sorry, I wasn't paying.
Mr. Smith votes aye. Mr. King. Aye. Mr. King votes aye. Mr. Rogers. Aye. Mr. Rogers votes aye. Mr. Duncan. Aye. Mr. Duncan votes aye. Mr. Barletta.
I cannot multitask.
Mr. Barletta votes aye. Mr. Perry. Aye. Mr. Perry votes aye. Mr. Katko. Aye. Mr. Katko votes aye. Mr. Hurd. Ms. McSally. Mr. Hurd votes aye. Ms. McSally. Ms. McSally votes aye. Mr. Ratcliffe. Mr. Ratcliffe votes aye. Mr. Donovan. Aye. Mr. Donovan votes aye. Mr. Gallagher. Aye. Mr. Gallagher votes aye. Mr. Higgins. Aye. Mr. Higgins votes aye. Mr. Rutherford. Aye. Mr. Rutherford votes aye. Mr. Garrett.
Yes.
Mr. Garrett votes aye. Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Fitzpatrick votes aye. Mr. Estes. Aye. Mr. Estes votes aye. Mr. Thompson. Nay. Mr. Thompson votes nay. Ms. Jackson Lee. No. Ms. Jackson Lee votes nay. Mr. Langerman. Mr. Langerman votes nay. Mr. Richmond. Mr. Keating. Nay. Mr. Keating votes nay. Mr. Payne. Nay. Mr. Payne votes nay. Mr. Vela. No. Mr. Vela votes nay. Mrs. Watson-Coleman. No. Mrs. Watson-Coleman votes nay. Ms. Rice. No. Ms. Rice votes nay. Mr. Correa. No. Mr. Correa votes nay. Mrs. Demings. No. Mrs. Demings votes nay. Mrs. Barragon. No. Mrs. Barragon votes nay. Mr. Richmond.
Have all members voted? Does any member wish to record or change his or her vote? How am I recorded?
The gentleman is not recorded.
I vote aye.
Mr. McCall votes aye.
The clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 18 yeas and 11 noes.
The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion reconsidered is laid on the table. This concludes the consideration of the bills noticed by the committee for today. Mr. Smith is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Rule 22, Clause 1 of the Rules of the House, I move that the committee authorize the chairman to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to go to conference with the Senate on the bills ordered reported by this committee today or on similar Senate bills.
Without objection, the motion is agreed to. The ranking member is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11 and Clause 2L, I ask that members have 2 calendar days to file with the clerk of the committee supplemental, additional, or minority views on each of the bills ordered reported by the committee today.
Without objection, so ordered. There being no further business to transact, the committee stands adjourned.